The message came at 3:47 in the morning, Earth Standard Time. Captain Day 1 was sleeping in his quarters aboard the reconnaissance vessel, indomitable when the alarm pulled him from his dreams. He had been dreaming about his daughter's birthday party, about the cake his wife had made, about the sound of children laughing. He would never dream of such things again. "Captain to the bridge," the ship's computer announced. "Priority 1 communication from Earth Defense Command." Day 1 dressed quickly and walked through the narrow corridors of his ship. His crew of 47 men and women were already moving to their stations. They had served together for 3 years, mapping the outer reaches of human space. They were explorers, not warriors. That was about to change. On the bridge, Lieutenant Hannah stood at the communications console. She was young, barely 26, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. When Day 1 entered, she turned to face him, and he saw something in her expression that made his stomach drop. "Sir," she said, "New Jeju colony has gone silent." Day 1 felt the words like a physical blow. New Jeju was home to 2.3 million people. It was an agricultural world, peaceful and quiet, famous for its rice fields that stretched across entire continents. His own cousin lived there with her family. "How long?" he asked. 72 hours. No response to any communication. No distress signal, nothing. The journey to New Jeju took 6 days at maximum speed. 6 days of silence from a world that should have been full of voices. Day 1 spent those days preparing his crew for what they might find. He told them to expect technical failure, solar interference, damaged communication arrays. He told them everything except what he truly feared. When the Indomitable dropped out of faster-than-light travel above New Jeju, the first thing they noticed was the silence. The orbital stations that should have been buzzing with cargo ships and passenger vessels were empty. The satellites that should have been broadcasting news and entertainment were dark. The world below looked peaceful, green and blue like Earth, but it felt like a graveyard. "I'm reading no life signs from the orbital stations," reported Ensign Junki from the science console. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "No life signs from anywhere." Day 1 ordered a landing party. He led it himself. He had to know. He had to see. They landed in the capital city in the central square where the colonial government buildings stood. The buildings were intact. The streets were clean. The power was still running. But there were no people. Then they found the bodies. The Valkyrians had been thorough. They had killed everyone and left them where they fell. Men in their offices, women in their homes, children in their schools. The colony's small security force had tried to fight back, and their bodies lay in the streets with weapons still in their hands. They had never stood a chance. Lieutenant Hannah found the security footage. She called Day 1 over to watch it, and what he saw burned itself into his memory forever. The Valkyrian ships had arrived without warning. They had broadcast a single message: humanity has bred too far, too fast. This is a correction. Then they had begun the killing. It took them 4 hours to murder 2.3 million people. 4 hours, and they were done, and they left the bodies as a message. Day 1 watched the footage 3 times. He watched families running. He watched parents trying to shield their children. He watched the Valkyrian soldiers moving through the streets with their weapons, killing everything that moved. When he was done watching, he walked outside and stood in the empty square and screamed until his voice broke. The report he sent to Earth Defense Command was the hardest thing he had ever written. He included the footage. He included the body count. He included the Valkyrian message. Then he sat in his captain's chair and waited for orders that he knew would change everything on Earth. Commander Ji-woo received the report in her office at Defense Command headquarters. She was a veteran of 30 years, a woman who had seen combat and death and horror. But when she watched the footage from New Jeju, she put her head in her hands and wept. Then she dried her eyes and began making calls. Within 6 hours, the Galactic Council had been informed. The Council was a coalition of advanced alien species that governed civilized space. Humanity had joined them 2 centuries ago, after proving they could be peaceful, after decommissioning their worst weapons, after promising to follow the rules. The council had never liked humanity. They thought humans bred too fast, expanded too quickly, asked too many questions. But they had tolerated them. Ambassador Valkyrian Tith addressed the council with a calm voice. The action on New Jeju was taken by rogue military elements, he said. The Valkyrian Empire does not condone this action. We will investigate and punish those responsible according to our laws. The council accepted this explanation. They urged restraint. They spoke of due process and proper procedures. They said that justice would be served in time, perhaps in a few decades. Once all the facts were known, President Minesio of Earth listened to this response with a face like stone. She was a former teacher, a woman who had spent her life believing in dialogue and understanding and peace. But she had also lost a nephew on New Jeju. He had been 7 years old. She addressed the council with a voice that was quiet and cold. You have 48 hours to turn over every person responsible for New Jeju, every soldier, every officer, every official who gave the order. If you do not, then restraint ends. The council dismissed her ultimatum. They called it emotional. They called it premature. They said that humanity needed to calm down and trust the system. They did not understand. They had never understood. They thought humanity's 2 centuries of peace meant that humanity had become soft. They thought the decommissioned weapons meant that humanity had lost its teeth. They thought the smiling ambassadors and the trading ships and the cultural exchanges meant that humans had forgotten what they were. They were wrong. On the indomitable, Captain Day 1 recorded a final log entry before beginning the journey home. His voice was steady, but there was something new in it, something hard and sharp and burning. They killed our children, he said. 2.3 million people, and they killed them like animals, and they left them in the streets. And now they want us to fill out forms. They want us to wait for their justice. They want us to be civilized. He paused and looked out the viewport at the peaceful-looking world below, the world that was now a tomb. They're about to learn something about humanity. They're about to learn what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. They're about to learn why our ancestors built the weapons we put away. War starts for real now. The indomitable turned toward Earth and behind it. The dead of New Jeju waited in silence for their justice to come. The 48 hours passed, and the Galactic Council did nothing. They held meetings. They formed committees. They drafted strongly worded statements. But they did not deliver the killers of New Jeju to human justice on Earth. President Minesio stood before the global parliament and spoke 3 words that changed history. Begin full mobilization. The galaxy did not know what those words meant. They were about to learn. Admiral Taehyun was 67 years old and had been retired for 15 years. He had spent the last decade growing vegetables in his garden and playing with his grandchildren. Before that, he had been the most feared military commander in human history. He had won the resource wars of 2298, the brutal conflicts that had united Earth under a single government. He knew things about warfare that humanity had tried to forget. When the call came, he was pruning his tomato plants. He listened to the message, set down his tools, and walked inside to pack his uniform. His wife watched him with tears in her eyes. "You're too old for this," she said. "I know," he replied. "But they killed children. They need someone who remembers the old ways." He reported to Defense Command headquarters and found chaos. Officers were running through corridors, shouting orders, trying to mobilize a military that had not fought a real war in 2 centuries. Taehyun watched them for a moment, then raised his voice. "Everyone stop." They stopped. They looked at him. Some of the younger officers did not know who he was, but they could see the steel in his eyes. "Panic helps the enemy," he said. "We don't panic. We plan, we prepare, and then we destroy them so completely that no one ever tries this again. Now, someone show me to the war room." In a secret facility deep beneath the Antarctic ice, Dr. Youngmi was waking up ghosts. She was a weapons physicist, one of the best on Earth, and she had spent her career studying theoretical destruction. Now she was going to make it real. The facility was called the Archive. It held everything humanity had agreed to decommission when they joined the Galactic Council. The Council had believed it was all destroyed. They were wrong. Humanity had never destroyed anything. They had simply hidden it and waited. Youngmi walked through corridors lined with sealed vaults. Each vault held weapons that the galaxy had called barbaric. Kinetic kill missiles that traveled at nearly the speed of light. Biological agents that could wipe out entire species. Gravity bombs that could crack planets like eggs. Humanity had built all of these things during their violent past, and they had never forgotten how to use them. She stopped at a vault, marked Ragnarok Protocol, and placed her hand on the scanner. The door opened, and she looked at the weapon inside. It was beautiful in a terrible way, a masterpiece of destruction that made everything the Valkyrians had seem like toys. "Wake up," she whispered. "We need you." Colonel Sung-ho received his orders on a rainy morning in Seoul. He was to form special operations teams for direct action against Valkyrian military targets. The orders came with a note from Admiral Tae-hyun. "I need soldiers who understand that mercy is a choice, not a weakness. Find me people who can turn it off." Sung-ho had served in some of the ugliest conflicts in human space. He had seen things that gave him nightmares. He had done things that gave him worse ones. He understood what Tae-hyun was asking for, and he knew exactly where to find it. He traveled to military bases across Earth and the colonies, interviewing soldiers, reading files, looking for a specific kind of person. Not the angry ones. Not the ones who wanted revenge. He wanted the cold ones. The ones who could look at a target and see only a target. The ones who could do terrible things and then eat dinner afterward. He found 300 of them. He called them the punishment battalions, and he began training them for missions that would make the galaxy scream, while the military prepared for war. Ambassador Bio-ra prepared for peace. She knew it would fail, but she had to try. She addressed the Galactic Council one final time. "This is your last chance," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. "Deliver justice for New Jeju, or we will take it ourselves. And I promise you, our justice will be more thorough than yours." The Valkyrian ambassador laughed. Actually laughed. "You threaten us? You are a minor species. You have no fleet to challenge us. You have no weapons to hurt us. Return to your world and be grateful we allow you to exist." Bio-ra looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, and the smile made several council members shift in their seats. "You really don't know, do you?" she said. "You really think we gave up everything? You really think those 2 centuries of peace meant we forgot what we are?" She stood up and gathered her things. "When the war drums start, remember this moment. Remember that we gave you every chance. You chose this." She walked out of the council chamber, and behind her the Valkyrian ambassador was still laughing. He would not be laughing much longer. On Earth, the transformation accelerated. Civilian factories switched to military production. Ships that had carried cargo and passengers were rebuilt to carry weapons and soldiers. Young people who had never seen violence lined up to enlist, their eyes full of fury and grief. Admiral Tae-hyun stood in the command center and watched the reports come in. Ship production was up 300%. Weapons manufacturing was running at full capacity. The old doctrines were being dusted off, the old strategies being revised for new technology. His aide, a young captain named Yunbai, approached with a tablet. "Sir, the Second Fleet is fully mobilized. 47 capital ships, 200 support vessels, 50,000 personnel. They're awaiting orders." Tae-hyun nodded. "Tell them to move to staging position Alpha 7. Complete blackout. No communications. No signals. Nothing. Sir, the Council will notice if our fleet disappears. Let them notice. Let them wonder. Let them start to feel what fear tastes like." The Second Fleet moved into position and went silent. To the galaxy's sensors, they simply vanished. The Council sent messages asking where they had gone. Earth did not respond. Dr. Youngmi completed the reactivation of the Ragnarok missiles and moved on to other projects. She developed new shield-breaking technology based on Valkyrian designs they had studied. She improved human weapons with alien knowledge, making them faster, stronger, more terrible. Every night she went home to her apartment and sat alone in the dark, thinking about what she was building. She told herself it was necessary. She hoped that was true. Colonel Sung Ho finished training his punishment battalions and declared them ready for deployment. They were not soldiers anymore. They were weapons in human form. They would be dropped onto enemy targets with one instruction: leave nothing standing. They did not cheer when they received their orders. They simply nodded and began loading their equipment. The Galactic Council finally realized something was wrong. They sent a peacekeeping fleet to human space, officially to monitor the situation. Unofficially, to intimidate Earth into backing down. Admiral Tehine received the news of their approach and smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Good," he said. "Let them come. Let them see the face of what they've awakened. And let them carry that image back to their masters." President Mencio made one final broadcast to the galaxy. Her face was calm, her voice steady, but there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. Something old and cold and patient. "We asked for justice," she said. "You gave us procedures. We asked for accountability. You gave us committees. We asked you to treat our dead with respect. You laughed at us." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "So now we will teach you respect. We will teach you that human children are not acceptable losses. We will teach you that our patience has limits. And when we are done teaching, you will never forget the lesson." She ended the broadcast, and across the galaxy, billions of beings watched and wondered what was coming. In his quarters aboard the fleet flagship, Admiral Taehyun recorded his own message for his commanders. It was simple and direct. Find every Valkyrian military installation, every base, every station, every ship. I don't want prisoners. I don't want surrender. I want them to understand that when you murder human children, you die. All of you. Make them understand. The Second Fleet emerged from hiding and began its hunt. The war that would reshape the galaxy had begun. The Valkyrian home system had never been attacked. In 4,000 years of their empire's history, no enemy had ever reached their core worlds. Their defense stations were the most advanced in the galaxy. Their fleet was the largest. Their soldiers were the most feared. None of it mattered. The human Second Fleet appeared without warning, dropping out of faster-than-light travel so close to the defense stations that the Valkyrians had only seconds to react. Those seconds were not enough. Commander Hyun-woo led the first assault wave. His ship, the Vengeance, was a converted cargo hauler that now carried enough weapons to level a city. He had volunteered for this mission the moment he heard about New Jeju. His sister had lived there with her 3 children. "All ships, weapons free," he said calmly. "No warnings. No demands. Just fire." The Ragnarok missiles launched first. They traveled at 90% of the speed of light, so fast that the Valkyrian sensors could barely track them. By the time the defense stations realized what was happening, the missiles were already striking. The first station exploded in a ball of fire that could be seen from the planet below. The second followed. Then the third. In the Valkyrian command center, Admiral Valkyrian Koss watched his defenses die. He was a veteran of 100 battles, a hero of the Empire, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans were not fighting like a civilized species. They were not trying to disable or capture or negotiate. They were simply killing. "Send the distress signal," he ordered. "Call for council intervention. These humans have gone mad." His communications officer looked at him with fear in her eyes. "Sir, they're jamming everything. We can't reach anyone." On the planet below, the civilian population looked up at the sky and saw their orbital stations burning. They had been told that humans were weak, that they would never dare to attack, that the galaxy would protect the Valkyrian Empire. They had been told lies. Commander Hyun-woo destroyed 12 defense stations in the first hour. His ships moved with a coordination that the Valkyrians could not match, striking from multiple angles, never giving the enemy time to regroup. When a Valkyrian battleship tried to engage, 3 human destroyers focused their fire and cut it in half. Admiral Tehian watched the battle from his flagship and felt nothing. He had shut down the part of himself that might have felt horror at what he was doing. He had seen the footage from New Jeju. He had seen the children lying in the streets. He would feel nothing until this was over. "Launch the ground teams," he ordered. "Colonel Sung-ho knows what to do." The punishment battalions dropped from orbit in armored shuttles, cutting through the atmosphere like falling stars. They landed at Valkyrian military academies, at training bases, at command centers. They did not come to occupy. They came to destroy. Colonel Sung-ho led the assault on the Imperial Military Academy, the oldest and most prestigious institution in the Valkyrian Empire. As his shuttle descended, he broadcast a single message. "You killed our children while they slept. We will give you the honor of facing us awake. You have 10 minutes to arm yourselves." It was not mercy. It was worse than mercy. It was giving the Valkyrians just enough hope to make their defeat more crushing. The Academy defenders fought hard. They were well-trained and well-equipped, and they believed in their empire. But they had never faced humans in ground combat. They had never seen how humans moved, how they fought, how they adapted. They had never faced an enemy that was not trying to win, but trying to punish. Sung-ho's soldiers moved through the academy like ghosts. They used weapons that the Valkyrians had never seen, tactics that the Valkyrians could not counter. They did not take cover and exchange fire. They attacked constantly, pushing forward, never giving the enemy a moment to breathe. When a Valkyrian soldier fell, they moved past without looking. They were not interested in the dead. They were only interested in making more of them. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it was over, the academy was a ruin, and not a single Valkyrian defender remained alive. Sung-ho walked through the wreckage and felt the weight of what he had done. He told himself it was necessary. He told himself that these were the people who had trained the killers of New Jeju. He told himself many things, and none of them made him feel better. Across the Valkyrian home system, similar battles were playing out. Human forces struck at military targets with overwhelming violence, destroying everything and everyone they found. The message was being written in fire and blood. "This is what happens when you touch humanity's children," the Galactic Council finally responded. They sent a peacekeeping fleet of 30 ships from 5 different species, with orders to stop the human attack and enforce a ceasefire. The fleet arrived in the Valkyrian system and immediately broadcast demands for humanity to stand down. Captain Day 1, now commanding a battle group of his own, received the transmission. He remembered watching the footage from New Jeju. He remembered the sound of his own scream in the empty square. He did not feel like obeying demands. "Council fleet, this is Captain Day 1 of the Earth Defense Force. Leave this system immediately, or you will be treated as accomplices to genocide." The Council fleet commander was shocked. No one spoke to the Council this way. No one threatened the peacekeepers. "Human vessel, you are in violation of galactic law. Stand down immediately or we will be forced to fire." Day 1 looked at his tactical display. 30 Council ships. He had 12. The math was not good. He did not care. "You had 2 centuries to keep the peace," he said. "You failed. Now get out of our way." The Council fleet opened fire. They believed that humans would not shoot back, that the threat of Council punishment would make them submit. They were wrong about many things, but this was the wrongest. Day 1's ships returned fire with everything they had. The Council vessels were not prepared for human weapons, for the speed and power and precision of the Ragnarok missiles. 3 Council ships exploded in the first minute. 2 more were disabled. The rest began to scatter. "They're running," reported Lieutenant Hanna from the tactical station. "Let them run," Day 1 replied. "Let them carry the message back to their masters. Let them tell the galaxy what they saw here today." The surviving Council ships fled the system. They would indeed carry a message, but it was not the message they had intended. They would tell the galaxy that humans were no longer civilized, that humans had become something else, something that did not negotiate, something that did not stop. On Valkyria Prime, the Empress addressed her people. She was ancient by Valkyrian standards, a ruler who had guided her empire for 200 years. She had approved the new Jeju operation. She had believed it was necessary to control human expansion. She had not expected this. "We offer peace," she announced. "We offer full reparations for New Jeju. We offer justice for those responsible. We ask the humans to cease their attack and negotiate." President Min Seo received the offer and considered it. Carefully, reparations, justice, negotiation, these were the things she had asked for before the war. These were the things the Council had refused to provide. Her response was broadcast across the galaxy. "You offer us justice now? After you have bled? After we have destroyed your defenses and killed your soldiers? You offer us what we asked for only because you are losing?" She shook her head slowly. "No, you mistake this for a negotiation. This is not a negotiation. This is an execution. You killed 2.3 million of our people. You left their bodies in the streets. You laughed when we asked for justice. So now you will receive our justice, and our justice does not stop because you ask nicely." She leaned forward, her eyes cold and hard. "We are only getting started." Lieutenant Hannah had been working on intelligence analysis when she found it. Hidden in the data recovered from New Jeju, encrypted and buried, was a file that changed everything. She brought it to Captain Day 1 immediately. "Sir, New Jeju wasn't random. It wasn't rogue elements. It was a test." Day 1 looked at the file. It was a Valkyrian strategic document, a plan for the systematic reduction of human population across the galaxy. New Jeju was Phase 1. There were 12 more phases planned, 12 more colonies targeted for extermination. The goal was to reduce humanity to a manageable level, a species that could be controlled. Day-1 read the document 3 times. Then he forwarded it to Admiral Taehyun with a single note. "They were going to kill us all. Every last one of us." Taehyun received the document and felt something shift inside him. Until now, he had been fighting for revenge, for justice, for the dead of New Jeju. Now he understood that he was fighting for survival. The Valkyrians had not made a mistake. They had begun an extermination. He broadcast a message to his entire fleet. They wanted to erase us, colony by colony, world by world, until we were too few and too weak to resist. New Jeju was not the end of their plan. It was the beginning. He paused and let that sink in. So we will not stop. We will not negotiate. We will not show mercy until every being in this galaxy knows you cannot touch humanity. You cannot threaten humanity. You cannot plan the death of humanity. Because if you try, we will come for you. All of us. And we will not stop until you are broken. The fleet acknowledged his message, and the war continued. But it was different now. It was no longer about revenge. It was about making sure that no one would ever try to destroy humanity again. The war entered its 3rd month, and the Valkyrian Empire began to die. General Jae-sung coordinated the campaign from Earth, directing 3 separate fleets in a systematic destruction of Valkyrian military power. He did not sleep more than 4 hours a night. He did not need to. The faces of the dead kept him awake. His strategy was simple: isolate and destroy. Valkyrian systems were cut off from each other, their communication networks shattered, their supply lines broken. Each world faced the human fleet alone, without knowing if help was coming, without knowing if they were the last ones left. Engineer So Young developed the technology that made this possible. She called it the Blackout System, a way to disable all Valkyrian communications across entire sectors of space. When human ships arrived in a system, the first thing they did was activate the blackout. The Valkyrians could not call for help. They could not warn their neighbors. They could only wait and watch the sky. The psychological effect was devastating. Valkyrian worlds that had not yet been attacked lived in constant fear, not knowing if today was the day the humans would come. Some systems tried to surrender before any shots were fired. Colonel Seung-ho's teams would arrive and find white flags everywhere. Valkyrian soldiers laying down their weapons and begging for mercy. Seung-ho gave them mercy, but not the kind they wanted. He did not kill those who surrendered. Instead, he destroyed their military bases, their weapons factories, their shipyards. He left the soldiers alive to watch their power being erased. Then he moved on to the next target. "We are not monsters," he told his soldiers. "We do not kill those who stop fighting, but we do not leave them able to fight again." Remember the difference. The punishment battalions became legends. Stories spread across the galaxy about human soldiers who appeared from nowhere, who fought with terrifying skill and precision, who could not be stopped and could not be killed. Most of the stories were exaggerated. Some were not exaggerated enough. On the human side, the war was taking its toll. Lieutenant Hannah spent her days analyzing Valkyrian intelligence and her nights unable to sleep. She had seen too much death. She had read too many reports about destroyed bases and burned cities. She began to wonder if humanity was becoming the thing it hated. One night, she went to Captain Day 1 with her concerns. She found him in his quarters staring at a photograph of his family. "Sir," she said, "how much longer do we do this? How much more do we destroy before it's enough?" Day 1 looked at her for a long moment. He understood her question. He had asked it himself many times. "We stop when every species in this galaxy knows that you cannot touch humanity's children," he said. "We stop when the lesson is so clear that no one will ever need to learn it again. We stop when the dead of New Jeju can rest." He turned back to the photograph. "I know it's hard. I know we're doing terrible things. But remember what they planned for us. Remember that New Jeju was just the beginning. If we stop now, if we show weakness, someone else will try what the Valkyrians tried. And next time it might work." Hannah nodded slowly. She understood even if she did not like it. She returned to her duties and did not speak of her doubts again. Dr. Young Mi faced her own crisis. She had created weapons that were killing thousands. She had improved human technology to the point where a single ship could destroy a fleet. She was good at her job, perhaps too good. And the weight of it was crushing her. One evening, she sat in her laboratory and looked at the plans for her latest creation, a device that could disable all electronics on a planet's surface, plunging entire civilizations into darkness. It was elegant. It was effective. It was horrifying. She put her head in her hands and wept. Later, she gave an interview to a journalist who asked how she felt about her work. Her answer became famous. "We opened Pandora's box," she said. "We cannot close it. We can only ensure that we are the ones holding it. These weapons exist now. They will always exist. The only question is who controls them and what they use them for. I would rather it be us than them." Ambassador Biora watched the war from Earth and argued for a different approach. In closed meetings with President Min SEO, she pushed for negotiation, for peace terms, for some way to end the destruction. "We are becoming what we hate," she said. "We are killing and destroying and calling it justice. But it is not justice anymore. It is vengeance." President Min SEO listened to her words carefully. She valued Biora's counsel. She valued her willingness to speak uncomfortable truths. But she did not agree. "No," the president said. "What we hate kills the innocent and calls it policy. We kill soldiers and call it justice. There is a difference. They murdered children and planned to murder more. We are destroying their ability to ever do it again. We are not the same." Bo wanted to argue, but she could not find the words. Perhaps because there were no words. Perhaps because the president was right. The Galactic Council met in emergency session to discuss the human war. The session lasted 12 hours and accomplished nothing. Half the council wanted to intervene against humanity. The other half was too afraid. The fear was winning. Species that had once looked down on humans now avoided human space. Trade ships changed their routes to stay away from human colonies. Diplomats who had once ignored human concerns now responded to every message immediately. The galaxy was learning respect, one terrified official at a time. The Valkyrian Empire cracked and began to fall apart. Outer colonies surrendered to human forces without a fight. Military commanders defected to save their troops. The Empress sent message after message pleading for peace, offering anything, everything, if only the humans would stop. Admiral Tahian received these messages and deleted them. He was not interested in pleas. He was interested in victory. His fleet reached the Valkyrian capital system and took up orbit around Valkyria Prime. The planet below was home to 12 billion Valkyrians. The heart of their civilization, the source of their pride? Tahian looked at it and considered his options. A group of his officers approached him with a proposal. They were hardliners, men and women who had lost family on New Jeju, who wanted the Valkyrians to suffer as humanity had suffered. Their proposal was simple: destroy Valkyria Prime. Kill everyone on the surface. End the Valkyrian species forever. We have the weapons, one of them said. We have the opportunity. We could finish this today. No more Valkyrians. No more threat. Just peace. Tahian looked at them for a long moment. He understood their anger. He shared it. He had dreamed of destroying the Valkyrians, of burning their world as they had burned New Jeju, but he was old enough to know the difference between justice and genocide. No, he said. The officers stared at him. Sir, we are not doing this for revenge anymore. We are teaching a lesson. Dead men tell no tales, but broken empires scream warnings for centuries. If we kill them all, they become martyrs. If we break them and leave them alive, they become a message. He turned to face the planet below. We do not destroy Valkyria Prime, we blockade it. Nothing in, nothing out? Their empire will watch their homeworld starve. Their children will grow up knowing hunger because their parents chose murder. And every species in the galaxy will see what happens when you touch humanity. The blockade began. Human ships surrounded Valkyria Prime and stopped all traffic. Supply ships were turned away. Evacuation vessels were refused. The planet that had once been the center of galactic power became a prison. President Min Seo addressed the galaxy to explain. This is what happens when you touch what is ours. We did not destroy their world because we are not them. We did not kill their children because we are not them. But we will not let them forget. We will not let them rebuild. We will not let them threaten us again. She looked directly into the camera, and her eyes held no mercy. Let every species see. Let every government remember. There are consequences, and humanity will enforce them. The siege of Valkyria Prime lasted 8 months. The population suffered. They rationed food. They rationed water. They rationed hope. The Empress made broadcast after broadcast begging for help, but no one came. The galaxy was too afraid of what humanity would do if they interfered. Inside the military, some officers questioned the blockade. They said it was cruel. They said it was wrong. They said that innocent civilians were suffering for the crimes of their government. Admiral Tahian answered them directly. The civilians of New Jeju were innocent. Their children were innocent. The Valkyrians killed them anyway. Now the Valkyrian civilians will know what it feels like to be helpless, to be hungry, to wait for death. They will teach their children about this. They will teach their grandchildren. And maybe in 100 years the lesson will finally be learned. He did not enjoy the siege. He took no pleasure in the suffering. But he understood that some lessons could only be taught through pain. On the 8th month, the Valkyrian government surrendered. They agreed to every demand. They offered everything. They had no choice. The war was over. But the consequences were just beginning. The surrender ceremony took place on Valkyria Prime, in the Great Hall where the Empire had ruled for 4,000 years. The Empress herself signed the documents, her hand shaking as she wrote her name. She had ruled for 2 centuries. She had never known defeat. Now she knew nothing else. Admiral Tahian stood across from her, his face expressionless. He did not feel triumph. He did not feel satisfaction. He felt only tired. The war was over, but the ghosts of New Jeju would never leave him. The terms of surrender were harsh. The Valkyrian military would be reduced to 1/10 of its former size. The Empire would pay reparations to New Jeju survivors and victim families for the next century. Every official involved in the genocide would face trial. Valkyrian schools would teach about New Jeju forever, so that no generation would forget what their ancestors had done. the hardest term was the last. Human observers would be placed in the Valkyrian government with the power to veto any decision that threatened other species. The Valkyrians were no longer independent. They would never be trusted again. The Empress signed each term without argument. She had no leverage. She had no choice. When she finished, she looked at Taehyun and asked a single question. Was this necessary? All of this death, all of this destruction? Could we not have found another way? Taehyun looked at her for a long moment. He thought about the children of New Jeju. He thought about the strategic document that planned humanity's extermination. He thought about the Council's laughter when humanity asked for justice. You could have, he said. We asked for justice. You offered procedures. We asked for accountability. You offered committees. We asked you to treat our dead with respect. You laughed at us. There was another way, but you chose not to take it. He turned and walked out of the Great Hall, and he did not look back. The war crimes trials began 3 months later. Captain Day 1 was called to testify. He told the tribunal about finding New Jeju, about the bodies in the streets, about the footage that haunted his dreams. He spoke for 4 hours, and when he was finished, the room was silent. The Valkyrian commanders showed no remorse at first. They claimed they were following orders. They claimed they were protecting their empire. They claimed that humans were a threat that needed to be contained. They said many things, but none of them were. Apologies. Then, the tribunal played the footage from New Jeju. The commanders watched the images of children being killed. They watched families running through the streets. They watched their own soldiers murdering people who had no weapons, no defenses, no hope. Some of the commanders looked away. Some of them wept. One of them asked for the footage to be stopped because he could not bear it. The sentences were harsh. Life imprisonment on a human-run penal colony, where the convicted would spend their remaining years rebuilding what they had destroyed. It was not death, but it was not mercy either. They would live with their crimes until they died. Ambassador Belra brought humanity's demands to the Galactic Council. The Council had no choice but to listen. They had seen what humanity could do. They had seen the Valkyrian Empire broken and bleeding. They did not want to be next. The demands were simple. Genocide would now be grounds for immediate military intervention, not decades of procedures. Species would have the right to respond immediately to attacks on civilians. The Council would have to act within 72 hours on atrocity accusations, or the injured party could act alone. The vote was unanimous. Every species agreed to every demand. They did not agree because they thought it was right. They agreed because they were afraid. Humanity had taught the galaxy fear, and the lesson had been learned. On Earth, the war's end brought complicated emotions. President Men SEO's approval rating was strange. 70% of the population supported the war's outcome, but 40% feared what humanity had become. They had won, but they had changed. They were not sure if they liked the change. Dr. Young Mi returned to her laboratory and tried to go back to theoretical research. She could not. Every equation reminded her of weapons. Every calculation reminded her of death. She gave a final interview before retiring from public life. I do not regret what I did, she said. I regret that it was necessary. We built terrible things because terrible things were done to us. Now we must live with what we built. That is the price of survival. The veterans of the war scattered to different lives. Colonel Sung-ho became the chief instructor for the Earth Defense Force, teaching what he called proportional response doctrine. He trained the next generation of soldiers to be capable of both mercy and mercilessness. To know when to use each one, Lieutenant Hannah entered politics. She ran for office on a platform of remembrance and restraint, arguing that humanity must never forget its capacity for violence but must also never use it without cause. She won her election and began a long career of keeping humanity honest about what it was. Captain Day 1 received command of the new Guardian Fleet, a permanent force stationed at New Jeju to ensure that nothing like the genocide would ever happen again. He spent his days patrolling the space around the rebuilt colony and his nights staring at the stars, thinking about the dead. Admiral Tehine returned to his garden. He planted vegetables and played with his grandchildren and tried to forget what he had done. He could not forget. The faces of the dead, both human and Valkyrian, visited him every night. He accepted this as the price of command. The galaxy changed. Human traders were welcomed everywhere they went, not from love but from fear. Piracy near human space dropped to zero. Other species began copying human military doctrines and weapons designs, trying to build their own deterrents. Xenophobic factions across the galaxy went quiet. Afraid that attacking lesser species might bring human attention, Earth established the Remembrance Service, a fleet that did nothing but visit New Jeju, honor the dead, and remind the galaxy what had happened and why. Their ships carried a simple message on their hulls: "We gave you peace. You gave us reason. Never again." The peace held, not because species trusted each other, but because they feared humanity too much to break it. It was not a comfortable peace. It was not a warm peace. But it was peace, and it lasted. 10 years after the war, Day One stood at the New Jeju Memorial. It was a field of 2.3 million lights, one for each victim. He came here every year on the anniversary. His children played nearby. His grandchild was on the way. Life continued despite death. Perhaps because of it, a delegation approached him. They were Valkyrians, young ones who had been children during the war. Their leader introduced herself as Ambassador Kelm. She was nervous, unsure of her welcome, but determined to speak. "We were taught what our people did," she said. "We were taught about New Jeju and about the war and about the suffering we caused. We came to say we are sorry. We came to promise that we will keep saying it. Every year, forever." Day One looked at her. He looked at the lights. He looked at his children playing in the distance. He thought about the dead and the living and the future that stretched out before them. "Good," he said finally. "Because the moment the galaxy forgets, the moment you think enough time has passed, that is when you will learn that this was mercy. We did not destroy your world. We did not kill your children. We did not erase your species. We chose to teach instead of exterminate. You are alive to remember because we allowed it." He stepped closer to her and his eyes were hard. "Honor that choice. Teach your children to honor it. Teach their children. Because if the lesson is ever forgotten, if anyone ever tries what your ancestors tried, they will not receive teaching. They will receive what they deserve." The Valkyrian bowed deeply. She joined the humans in silence, looking at the lights. Remembering the dead. The galaxy learned a truth during the war that it would never forget. Humanity could be the gentlest species in existence. They built art and music and stories. They explored and traded and made friends with anyone who offered friendship. They raised their children to be kind and curious and brave, but they also remembered how to be fire. They remembered the violence of their ancestors, the wars that had nearly destroyed them, the weapons they had built and hidden and never forgotten. They could switch from gardeners to destroyers in an instant, and they did not hesitate to do so when their children were threatened. That was the human paradox. That was what the galaxy had learned. Humanity was peaceful by choice, not by nature. And choices could be changed. The peace lasted for 200 years after the war. 200 years of quiet, of trade, of exploration, of growth. Species flourished. Civilizations advanced. The galaxy became a better place than it had been before, and through it all, humanity kept their weapons ready. They never decommissioned another system. They never destroyed another archive. They never forgot what they could do, because they were gardeners. But they remembered how to become fire. And they would never let the galaxy forget it. The memorial on New Jeju still stands. The lights still shine. The message is still clear: we are humanity. We want peace. We build and create and love, but touch our children and war starts for real. You have been warned.